doing all right. We're talking about political parties again. And yesterday we said, look, that just the political parties, they are these groups of like-minded people who want to get candidates elected uh, to office, and then that will provide them a way to affect policy in the ways they see fit. And we were talking about yesterday that American political parties are kind of the oddballs in the world, that we have umbrella parties, okay? Umbrella parties are where we have these broad groups, these coalitions of people that have just enough in common that they can work together towards some similar goals, okay? And not insulting your intelligence, but Democrats and Republicans, those are the two big umbrella parties in the United States. And over in Europe and Asia, and even really to South America and other places too, where we have modern democracies, um, the political parties over there are what we call ideological parties, where they're not these broad umbrella coalitions. They're very specific in their beliefs, and that they tend to be more, I guess you could say, homogenous in what they believe. That if you talk to one member of a particular party over in Europe, you can bet that everybody else in the party thinks in a similar mindset. Okay, whereas here, a Democrat from West Virginia might not be the same as a Democrat from, another location. And I'm going to show you that too with an article that you're going to see later on. It'll only take you a couple minutes to read through it, but I think you'll appreciate it. Okay. Now, today we want to talk about tasks of a political party. Their main job, of course, is to get people elected into office, but there's certain things that candidates are going to have a responsibility for doing, or excuse me, parties have a responsibility for doing, and one of those is candidate selection or candidate nomination. Okay, that one of the things that parties want to do is recruit good people to run for office and then get them nominated, get the party to agree that this is our candidate for office. Now, prior to the 20th century, what parties would do is they would just have these party conventions where they would have a giant party meeting, and they would select their candidates that they're running for office and say, "Here you go. These are the candidates that we're supporting." And so, maybe Democrats would pick, Joe Smith for their nominee for president of the United States, and Republicans would pick Bill Jones over here as their candidate for office. And what would happen is people would get a little bit frustrated because what if they didn't like either one of the candidates? What if you have a Democrat, like maybe you're a Democrat and you're like, well, I don't really like this Democratic candidate that my party put out, and I don't really like the Republican candidate either. And so what happened was people had to make what we call clothespin votes, where they have to hold a clothespin or hold their nose and make a vote because both candidates stink. All right. So prior to the 20th century, you'd have these big party meetings where the party would just say, okay, for United States President of the United States, here is our candidate that we're putting out there. And for Senator in West Virginia, here's our Democratic candidate we're putting out there. And you just had to choose whether you wanted to vote for the Democrat or the Republican in the general election. Okay. But right around the turn of the century, people got frustrated with that. And here's the thing that made them frustrated. At these party conventions, okay, what would happen is that you'd only have the party elites, the well-to-do, the well-off people who are going to these party conventions. They're the only ones who can afford to go. They're the only ones that can take time away from their life and their schedule to go to these party conventions. And so it's the party elites, the wealthier people who are choosing the nominees that the party puts out there. And so to make it a more uh, inclusive, democratic, little d democratic idea, they started using primary elections. Okay. And so this way, you would have a field of Democrats or a field of Republicans, and party members would get to choose among those individuals. So let's say you've got on the Democratic side, you'd have candidates A, B, C, D, and E for President of the United States, and you would get to choose which one you think Democrats should nominate to take on the Republican. Think of it as like a playoff to get to the championship game against the other party. right? And so primary elections at least gave party members a choice. You could put your hat in the ring, so to speak, and say, I want to be considered for United States Senator or United States House of Representatives. And that way, if people in the party liked you, you could end up being the nominee. Okay. And we'll talk more about that primary process later on. Now, candidate selection at local levels can be really difficult, and this is for state offices too. Parties, even today, they try very hard to recruit candidates to run for office because sometimes it's difficult to get people to run. You never have a problem recruiting somebody to run for president or to run for senator or House of Representatives, but even that can be difficult. Here's an example. Republicans won all three House races and the one Senate race that was open in West Virginia for United States House of Representatives and U.S. Senate, right? The thing was is that Democrats knew they'd probably lose all of these races, but they have to try to find somebody to run for that office because they can't let it go uncontested. They have to at least put up some type of a fight. So, like in our district, our third district here in West Virginia, we're the southern third of the state, and in our district, Carol Miller was the incumbent, the person already in office, the Republican, and so Democrats had to recruit people to run for office and give it a shot, even though they knew it would be a long shot to win against a Republican. Okay, and at the state level, state legislature, governor. A lot of people knew that beating Jim Justice for governor was going to be hard because he had a lot of name recognition and he's a billionaire. All right. He's got a lot of resources at his disposal. So, they still had to nominate a candidate and try to recruit people to run for that position. Okay. So, candidate selection or candidate nomination is really important to a political party, and that includes recruiting good people to run for office. Right. That's one of the tasks of a political party. Something else that candidates do is or excuse me, that parties do is they give cues to voters. Okay, when you go into vote, or even when you're just looking at candidates to consider, they've always got that D or that R beside their name, right? Letting you know a little something about that particular candidate. Okay. And what I'm showing you right now is a ballot from 2008 in Arizona. And if you look on the left, you see that it's in the general election, and you see that you've got Barack Obama. It tells you he's a Democrat, John McCain, a Republican, Bob Barr's libertarian, and so on down the line. And you probably know when you go into office, or excuse me, when you go into the ballot box there, you know who you're going to vote for president. That's never an issue. And you can see U.S. House of Representatives. People always know who they're going to vote for the big offices. But you start looking over there on the right, and you see the county attorney and the county recorder and the school superintendent and local sheriff. Maybe you haven't looked uh, maybe you haven't looked at those individuals or looked them up and done research on them. That's okay, because when you look at, like, say on the county attorney there, you see Tim Nelson, Andrew Thomas, and Michael Kielski. The fact that that party label is right beside them, you can make some basic presumptions about that candidate based on their party label. And so that party label gives a cue to you that, hey, if this person's a Democrat, here's probably some things I could guess, make an educated guess that they will support, or a Republican candidate or a libertarian. You get that mindset that this is what they probably support. All right. So parties are selecting candidates to run for office, or they're nominating candidates. They give cues to voters. They also want to try to affect policy. Okay. Political parties want to convince people when they get in office, they want those candidates running for office to make changes to policy that they want to see enacted. Okay. So, for example, Carol Miller here in our district, Republicans 2 years ago helped her get elected into office in 2018. And even though Carol Miller has to be her own person and make choices that she thinks will be best for West Virginians in our district, Republicans are going to expect her to vote the way that they want on certain key issues. So you better believe that they're like, hey, if you want our support in the future, then you know what? You better do what we want you to do on certain issues. All right. And the party doesn't try to put the screws to you on every single vote. But if you vote out of accordance with what the party wants too many times, they're going to say, hey, if you don't watch it, we're going to find somebody else to support in the next election. Okay? So you have to support what the party wants, even though you may not believe in every single thing that the party stands for. All right. So you get to be your own person as a member of Congress or as the president, but you also need some support from the political party. Now, one of the things I also put under on your outline under affecting policy is there's some limitations to how much a party can control you if you're a member of Congress or even the president. Okay. And a good example of that is Republicans thought when Donald Trump got the nomination in 2016 to be the Republican candidate, they said, you know what, we're going to support him. He's not the favorite candidate that we had, but we're going to get behind him and we're going to support him. And once he becomes president, he'll fall in line with what Republican Party wants. But what they didn't realize is that Trump's supporters cared about him more than they cared about the Republican Party. All right. Donald Trump has money and name recognition and kind of a celebrity cult following. All right. And so, for example, if Donald Trump ran as an independent, let's say he wants to run for president again in 2024 and he decides to not run as a Republican, but he runs as an independent, he would still be able to get a lot of support, even though the Republican Party wouldn't back him. Okay, and so that's one of the benefits of having name recognition and money on your own. That you don't have to bend over backwards to try to please your political party. Okay, and so that's frustrated a lot of Republicans that Donald Trump just kind of does his own thing. He's not really trying to enact Republican or conservative policy a lot of the time. He's trying to do what he wants. And they're like, hey, Trump, you're not being a team player. And Trump is basically saying, I don't have to be a team player. If you're somebody who has name recognition, you don't necessarily need the party. I'll give you an example. Uh, Several years ago, and I know you guys are probably too young to remember this, but if you go back and do some reading, in the 1990s, the University of Nebraska's football coach was a guy named Tom Osborne, and he won three national championships, made Nebraska football a huge deal, an even huger deal than it was already, and he was practically venerated as the state's most famous individual at that time. And when he retired from coaching college football, he got into politics. And people didn't realize Tom Osborne had a doctorate degree in education. And he was immensely popular in Nebraska. And he ran as a Democratic candidate and he easily won election to the House of Representatives. All right. Now, do you think that guy who is practically worshipped as a college football hero in Nebraska, who has a doctorate degree in education and had plenty of money, do you think he really needed the help of the Democratic Party there? And the answer is no, he didn't. Okay, so the party knew that they only have so much influence over him, whereas if some random person comes up through the party and has built himself up over time and wanted to run for office, but they didn't have money or name recognition, they'd need the party's help. Okay? Parties are trying to affect and change policies. At the same time, parties are expected to provide balanced competition to one another. All right? When you're the party that's in the majority, like you've got a majority of the members in Congress or you have control of the presidency, you put out your program about what you want to see done in America, your policy agenda. Okay? And everybody has a policy agenda. Right? But when you're the party in the minority, you're expected to do the same thing. You put out your own policy agenda and say, here's what we would do if we were in charge. Okay? You want to provide a balanced competition and you want to specifically say, hey, here's what we would do if we were given the opportunity to lead. And part of that balanced competition was what I was talking about earlier, that you also run candidates for election. Okay? You don't leave races uncontested. You have to put an effort out there to challenge the other party, even though they are probably going to win in some elections, right? Political parties also provide, even though they're providing balanced competition, they also give political candidates what we call the honeymoon period. All right. The honeymoon period. This is like when people get married. Okay. When people first get married, everything is sweet and cute. You're like, oh my gosh, you left your socks on the floor. It's so cute. We're married now. Or you do the dishes, but you don't do them right, and your spouse is like, oh, it's okay. You don't know how to do this. And for the first couple of months of your marriage, everything's sweet and cute. But then after about a year or 2 years, it gets really annoying, all your ugly habits. All of a sudden, leaving the socks on the floor is not cool anymore. And you're like, hey, this is ridiculous. It's time to grow up. All right. Well, in political terms, the honeymoon period's like that. When a new candidate gets into office, like for example, when Joe Biden takes over as president on January 20th, Republicans are going to be expected to give him this honeymoon period, this time period of about 2 to 3 months where they don't criticize the new president. They give him a chance to get acclimated to his new job and to enact some of his policies before they go criticizing him. And that's true of any candidate running for office because there's no way you can adequately prepare for this job until you start doing it. So they're like, look, before we go being extra critical of candidate running for or who's going to take office, we got to give them an opportunity to do their job. All right. Now, next thing here, and please forgive me on your outline. I went from the number 4 to the number 6, so don't hate me. It was just an accident. Uh, Political parties are expected to educate and mobilize voters. Okay? You want to provide to educate and mobilize voters. And when we say educate, you want to provide the citizens with the information that they need about your particular candidate and your policies and what you want to accomplish. And at the same time, you want to teach them about their rights, their responsibilities as voters, as engaged citizens, and you want to mobilize these people. That means you want to get them organized and get them to come out and participate in your events and to come out to vote. All right. So educating and mobilizing voters is a particular way to for parties to get involved. Plus, remember, if the main goal is to get your candidates elected, then educating or mobilizing voters, getting them to come out and support your candidates at events and in terms of going out to the ballot box to vote, that serves your primary purpose. All right. Another thing you want to do as a political party, you provide campaign funds. Okay, campaign funds and you want to provide campaign assistance as well. Okay. Um, we all know, and we looked at last chapter, you realize that campaigns can be ridiculously expensive. It costs a lot of money to run a campaign. And so candidates realize this, and political parties help fund campaigns. They also use that as a means of holding something over your head. So, for example, if I'm running for office and I know that the political party has given me X amount of dollars, and they also organize fundraising dinners and a number of other political activities and get volunteers to work for my campaign, I kind of owe them something. Whereas, some other candidates don't need that. All right. And that's a way that they exercise a little bit of control over you. And if you don't do what the party wants, they may threaten to run somebody against you in the next primary election. All right. So you have to be aware that these are the things that political parties are involved in. And we know that providing campaign funds is ridiculously important if you want to get elected. All right. Let's start talking a little bit about party organization and structure. The party is active at all major levels, the national party level, the state level, and local party leadership also. And let me show you what a lot of people think. A lot of people think political parties are like a hierarchy, that the national Democrats tell the West Virginia Democrats what to do, and then they filter it down to like your local levels to county by county and city by city. This is not the way it works. It's not like the Catholic Church. Okay, Catholic Church is a great example of a hierarchy. Political parties don't work on a hierarchy. Okay, here's a better way to show you how they operate. All right, there's some overlap in the area, but national, state, and local party leadership, they don't always agree on certain things. Okay, and so here's what you see: national Democrats, for example, aren't the same as West Virginia Democrats. West Virginia Democrats have always traditionally been a little more conservative than what the national level is. So let's take like a for instance here that at the national level, Democrats would support almost all LGBT issues. Whereas here in the state of West Virginia, even West Virginia Democrats aren't quite as liberal on LGBT issues as they are at the national level. And so uh, the national Democrats don't tell West Virginia Democrats what to do. Okay? They're aligned on certain key policies, but they don't have to agree on everything. And if you even look at county by county, do you think Democrats here in Cabell County are the same as Democrats in Mingo County? Not at all. Here in Cabell County, the social issues, and you saw that really big time this summer with, like for example, the Black Lives Matter movement. There were some protests and some people marching in Huntington, where you're not going to see that in Logan or Mingo County, even among Democrats. All right, and so you don't have a hierarchy. You more have like this overlapping kind of area where West Virginia Democrats are not the same as national Democrats, and even within the state, Democrats differ a little bit, and that's the uh, that's kind of the downside of having these umbrella parties. Right? They're more like coalitions that have just enough in common. All right, so don't be confused by that. Okay, now we'll stop with that today, and we'll pick up with how this party structure works a little bit more on Thursday in class, and tomorrow I'll have a little assignment for you. Hope you guys are doing all right.